administration has issued new regulations totally on its own in the home foreclosure crisis, requiring that there be mandatory arbitration negotiation with the court before any papers are filed, once they file paper before it goes forward. It seems to me that on the level of the crisis that I've heard today, and I think it's true, that someone needs to approach Jonathan Van Fowl and demand that the same regulations be put in effect for lease renewal problems for landlords. There's no reason why, since they've done it in the mortgage foreclosure situation, they cannot do it here too. Someone should approach them.
Since I do represent people involved in the mortgage foreclosure crisis as well, and I'm involved in a couple of cases with Chase and a few other big banks now, I think unless you have an attorney, just like I said before, even going along with what you just suggested, which makes sense on its face, people can't afford to pay attorneys to be there and represent them. It's very heavily weighed in favor of the big banks in terms of foreclosures, and it's an outrageous system what goes on. I mean, I have several clients right now where their husbands were served, but their husbands have been dead for 20 years, and yet they sit there in court and say, we served the guy. So this is what we're up against, and there's no balance, and this law will help that. Nobody's going to come forward like the speaker suggested or the DA suggested. It's just not reality.
And that's what I want to follow up on the judge's suggestion. It hasn't been brought up, but there's a discriminatory practice going on here, which is sanctioned by the government in the current system that we have, and I'll point out what it is. We talk about the free marketplace. That means you negotiate. In this case, what happens is everyone can negotiate except the existing tenant. That's the only person in the world that cannot negotiate. They are take it or leave it situation, because the landlord thinks the market rent is going to be in your experience. So I want to point that out. Now I'm on that side. The only person that doesn't get a chance to negotiate is the existing tenant, because the landlord thinks he's going to get 3 times the rent. After he evicts the tenant, and we have an empty store, then the free enterprise system goes back into place and people negotiate. And the irony here is that the good tenant who's been there all this time paying his rent on time never gets offered the deal, because it's not the 3 times the rent as before. It's whatever the market would come up with, which is usually not what the landlord was asking for initially. So I think that's to get to that judge's point. So I would like you to address that.
I want to give you 2 quick ones, real fast. Number one, that's why you got empty stores for years in neighborhoods all over the city. And number 2, arbitration for anybody that's a practicing attorney that's actually out there every single day. Arbitration every single year is more and more and more part of every single facet of our lives, from stock deals to people doing civil entertainment deals, to even just on leases. We try to put it in as many times that I get the chance. I stick the arbitration clause in there, but it's very hard to get it done. It's certainly at the small mom and pop store level. The landlord has the upper hand, total control, and that's why this is beyond an emergency. It really is a crisis, which I think Bob said, and we really have to do this fast, because we are losing too many businesses every year. Far more in the world of helping out at the Small Business Help Office, that's for sure.